Coach, the last time we
Yeah,
talked, remember you told me you had a lot of stories about the CBA and NBA stuff. I saw that in one of the interviews with Vince. Okay, may I ask what else do I aside from Isaiah Thomas? That is, I know you
right.
hate. I hate you hate a lot. What
Well,
other experiences?
you know, the CBA was very unique. Now it's a G League,
Mhm,
and each NBA team owns a G League team. But
mhm,
back when the CBA was strong and it was the G League before the G League, it was a team can pull players from any team. So
mhm,
while I was in Rockford, a player can get called up to the Bulls. He get called up to Portland Trailblazers. He can get called up to any team. So it was, and the NBA supplied money and supplied referees and that to the CBA, but the CBA was just a mercenary type league where players could be called up to any NBA team. So there were no two-way contracts and things of that nature. But it was probably for me one of the greatest times of my life because I was dealing with NBA players on a daily basis. I was getting phone calls from big time NBA. I mean, Jerry Krause would call about players. NBA teams would call about players. I'd send in reports about players. Uh, Sometimes even an NBA team would try to hide a player in the CBA and say, "Work with them, and we're going to bring him back up." Uh, so there was a lot of NBA talk, a lot of things like that. Nowadays, people don't even know that. It's been so long that people don't even understand or even know what the CBA was or is or anything else. So, but if you want to know some great stories, uh, I'll tell you a funny story that was, and it involved a player named Stace Bozeman.
okay.
Okay, he was a guard, and he's a friend of mine on Facebook. So I think I can tell this story. But he played for me in Rockford, and then he went. We didn't sign him back, and he went to another team in Michigan called the Michigan Mayhem.
Okay.
So we played in a game in Rockford, and and we won. And after the game, Stace Bozeman was very excited and very upset about losing. And our mascot went up to him and was, doing one of these dances, a typical mascot dance. And Stace Bozeman turned around and punched him and knocked him down in the mascot outfit. And then he walked back to the locker room. Well, our mascot was so upset and he wanted to press charges and everything else. We didn't do anything like that. But what a funny story was, the next time Michigan came to play us in Rockford during pregame announcements of starting lineups,
Yeah.
when they announced the starting lineup of our mascot, we had an ambulance drive up on the court,
Mm-hmm.
and then the doors opened up, and our mascot came out with a big bandage over his head. And then we had like all these different mascots from around the area, college mascots and everything else. They all came out and supported in support of our mascot and was taunting Bozeman. So it's kind of a funny story,
All right.
of a circus type atmosphere. But I always thought that was really funny. As mascot support, our mascot night because he got punched by Stace Bozeman. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Okay.
I don't.
Did that affect
What's that?
Bozeman's game? I mean, when he saw that.
I can't remember if we won, but I thought it was hysterical. I thought it was really funny. Another time, another funny story was, a Midas or the muffler balls. We had like these foam balls that were given out to fans, like mini basketballs. They were sponsored by a muffler dealership.
Mm-hmm.
So it had the logo on it, and they paid to have these. So always during a timeout in the fourth quarter, all the fans that sat behind the visiting benches would throw those balls at the visiting team. So
Seriously?
yeah, it was like a tradition.
Okay.
So the coaches, with their clipboards, would have to put the clipboards behind their head as they all got pelted with, the muffler foam rubber muffler balls. But that I thought was a funny little thing too. But as a non-basketball related issue, but we had I was very fortunate to have so many great players play for me. We just talked about Keith Klaus, but the great thing about the CBA was there was a mixture between NBA players. They were right on that cusp where I had Desmond Ferguson get called up by Portland. Keith Klaus played with the Clippers. Uh, oh my gosh, the list goes on. Carlos Strong, Steve Castleberry played for the 76ers. Richard Manning played, in the NBA. I had so many NBA players. And then you had another rung of players that played summer league, that were drafted out of college that played in the summer league. And then you could have a whole nother plethora of players that were trying to get to the NBA, that fell under the radar. And I was very fortunate to have a lot of players that played for me that were outstanding players, but never really got an NBA look. So you really had to have a keen eye for talent and what your team needs were. And you could have a ton of NBA guys, but also I enjoyed having those bottom guys. They were trying to get to the NBA because they played so much harder, and they had a chip on their shoulder. They had something to prove. So to me, that's what made the NBA great.
Earlier, you mentioned Jerry Krause. I mean, how did any player that he got interested in from your end?
Well, Jerry Krause, I had Matt Stenenga, who played for Michigan State. He was a Krause guy. He came up, and he got called up to the Bulls. But Jerry Krause was fascinated for a short period of time with international players. Now, you all know about Tony Kukoc, but he wanted to bring over the next overseas player and put him in the CBA, let him develop, and then bring him up.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I wish I would have known. I remember his name.
What year was this? I'll look it up. What year was it? Was it after the Jordan era? Jordan
You have to look. But during the Jordan years, he always had. But I had Linton Johnson, was a kid, as a hardworking kid. He got brought up to the Bulls. He wasn't from overseas, but that was another under the radar guy. Krause enjoyed a lot of those under the radar guys, to just fill in gaps.
Mm-hmm.
He had his superstars, but he needed those guys, Fred Hoibergs and the Judd Bushlers and the guys like that who could fill in gaps. Craig Hodges, those types of players. But he's always was looking for like a diamond in the rough, somebody to attach his name to really make him a spectacular guy with an eye for talent. And he would take those guys and stick them in the CBA, and then you would work with them, and then maybe you'd be able to bring them up.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking to Bruno Sendoff, who was an overseas guy. He played for the Gary Steelheads, but he was 7'3". But he played for Gary. And that was an overseas guy that came into the CBA after he got cut by the Knicks.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the day, those were back to the basket type guys. But he was more like Porzingis.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't make it in the NBA because he was one of those unicorn guys. He was a 7'3" guy that could shoot the three and take people off the dribble. But back then, that was not the NBA way. Now he'd be making millions.
Yes.
But Bruno Sendoff, Sundov, great guy. He played for Gary. We played against him, but I had a friendship with him. But he was Christian Porzingis before Christian Porzingis. But he just never was able to stick in the NBA because the NBA just was not ready for that type of game.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's interesting to see what happens in the NBA with the big guys in the NC2A tournament. North Carolina's, they got, the monster center and Edney from Purdue. So we're going to see maybe if the NBA might shift back
mm-hmm.
to big bodies down there in the low post,
mm-hmm.
But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the way that Krause was looking at players before, do you think that would be effective now? I mean, if he was still alive and handling the Bulls?
Oh yeah, well, I was just talking about it with a friend of mine. 30% of your NBA players are overseas players.
Uh-huh.
30%. About 10 years ago, I did an article for a local paper here, and I said, you will soon see 50% of the NBA will be overseas players.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody thought I was crazy. You're crazy. No, 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 you're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way it's going now.
Yes.
Uh, and you can blame it on any wide variety of factors that you want. But now the NBA is 30% overseas. And if you look at your MVPs of the league,
Mm-hmm.
Joker, uh, Giannis, look at your MVPs of the NBA over the last couple of years. So basketball now is so much more of a worldwide game than ever before. And the basketball market, the NBA dollars generated from overseas stuff is astronomically huge. Back when I was just getting started, 30 years ago, that was unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's the norm.
Mm-hmm.
And you really, the competition for jobs is even that much stronger.
Interesting. That's interesting. I never knew that. I mean, everybody portrayed Jerry Krause as a villain. I mean, about the Jordan stories.
Now, people did Jerry Krause as a villain because of, if you watch the Last Dance, which everybody certainly has, but the Bulls players and everything, they thought they still had another run in them,
Yeah.
which I can understand. Where Krause wanted to rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and let me tell you, with the money that these guys make and everything else, there's huge egos involved too.
True.
Okay, but give credit where credit's due. He brought in Rodman, he got Pippen, and he was able to surround Michael Jordan, and Michael Jordan with a huge alpha personality, with great role players, to fill in those gaps. Even with Will Perdue and the big guy from Australia, the big center from
Longley.
Australia, whose name is Luke Longley. Cartwright was a great glue guy. He brought in Robert Parrish at the end of his career. The big chief at the end of his career. But he had great players to help supplement Judd Bushler, as we talked about before, to just fill in those gaps. You had your superstars. You got treated like a superstar if you played like a superstar. But he was able to bring in great. Bobby Hansen's another one. Great role players that understood their role, that accepted their role definition, role acceptance, and that was Krause's forte. And but it just was a clash at the end. It was a clash with Jackson, and then he brought in Tim Floyd, and that was the end of it. He thought he could rebuild it, and he couldn't, and that's why he's getting the boos. Nobody's gonna, boo Michael Jordan. He's the greatest of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and that really was unfair that people booed him with that or think he's a villain. But it is what it is.
I never knew that. I mean,
Oh, if you look at your role players, the kid that played for Notre Dame, the shooting guard, even Steve Kerr was another one.
yeah.
Just great, humble role player guys. Ron Harper was a big guard. Okay, I'll give him Ron Harper, but you just had great role player type guys, and he was very good at seeing what the weaknesses are of his team and finding those types of players to fill those roles, and they had great success doing it. You had the big three towards the end with Rodman and Pippen and Jordan, but he was able to get, those guys. But the role players is what really, really, really helped catapult the Bulls, because Jordan couldn't do it all the time, all by himself. He's a fantastic player, but those other guys the bench strength was strong.
Do you think they could have won another title if, I mean, that didn't go that way?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great. Obviously, Pippen left, and you never knew what Dennis Rodman was so volatile. But for me, I'm a humble guy. I think so anyway. But I would be like, if my leader, Michael Jordan, said, let's give it one more run, I would have given it one more run, because he's the greatest. You have to respect. You got to respect the greatest of all time. And he competed harder than anybody. And for me personally, I believe it's player driven, not ego driven. And I could always take a back seat and I would hopefully be able to have a conversations and be able to work on it where if you wanted to make another run, we'd make another run. But that's just me. I'm sitting here,
Yeah, it's a
So
big question. I mean, did they ended it on a high note. I mean, who knows if they could, some are saying they could have made another run, maybe another year or something like that. But based on the turmoil, it's been since 1997. I've talked to Sir Roland asked me about it. Those stories about what was happening behind the scenes. I
yeah.
mean,
I believe they even told Phil Jackson this was going to be his last
yes,
year.
yes.
I mean, who does that? Oh, it's just egos, egos, egos. You know, rising waters raise all boats, man. Let's just enjoy it.
Hmm.
You don't have to. And if you're having problems on the plane rides or the bus rides with guys taunting you, don't ride with them.
Yeah.
Take your own separate stuff. Just run your club. And if there has to be a go between, you got to hire a go between to make sure things keep running smooth. As a buffer, do that. But the name of the game is just keep winning. And until they prove you wrong, just keep winning. Keep making those checks. Keep building on the legends, and just keep winning games.
All right. Back to the CBA.
Okay.
Aside from Isaiah Thomas, is there anyone you hate or love or if you can't forget during your time in the CBA?
I hate to say hate, but
Don't like.
you
It's
know,
fine.
I'll be honest. You have a typical. Now, this is people don't understand this about the CBA.
Mm.
A typical road trip for me would be, I would have to travel to go to Gary, and Gary was coached by Keith Smart. Keith
Mm-hmm.
Smart is coaching in the NBA right now. See, I had to be prepared, you know, and then from Gary we would go to Dakota. Dakota was coached by Dave Yeager. Dave Yeager now is an assistant. He was head coach of Memphis Grizzlies. He was an assistant. He's an assistant right now with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be prepared. Then you'd shoot on over to Sioux Falls, and you were coached by Paul Wolpert. Paul Wolpert, a fantastic coach. He coached in the G League, was an NBA assistant. Or Mo McCone, who coached the San Antonio Spurs. They were great coaches. So for me, I was an outsider looking in because I didn't have that pedigree, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I had an animosity, but a great respect for those coaches because I wouldn't kiss their rings and just roll over, you
Right.
know. But I never really pushed myself for the NBA because the Rockford was, I really enjoyed it. But now looking back, 20 years, 30 years later, boy, I had to coach against some really, really great coaches.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people just don't understand that about the CBA. I mean, any given day, you were going up against great coaches who had NBA experience, and I had none. I
Mm-hmm.
just had to I just had to work my butt off to beat them. And I've been very fortunate, to be an all-star coach 4 years of my 5, to be the 5th highest winning percentage of all time in 60 years. That includes Phil Jackson, George Karl, Flip Saunders. You know, my name ranks right up there. But now, if you talk to people in the Philippines or Vietnam or some of these other places, they don't even know that. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of that. If you want to know what really aggravates me or bothers me, that kind of bothers me is because I've been there, done that, and I just don't get that type of respect from people. But it is what it is.
Coach, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if it was you. Were you a player development coach in the NBA before?
Summer League I was very fortunate. I had Gerald Oliver,
Mm-hmm.
who coached in the CBA,
Mm-hmm.
who coached under George Karl. He
Mm-hmm.
brought me in to Seattle and Milwaukee
Mm.
to to help out and work with players. what a great opportunity that was back then. I was much younger than I am now, but just a great, and that's really when I watched George Karl, and Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
That's where I picked up a lot of my defensive stuff.
Oh.
Was from George Karl. Now people don't even know that.
Yeah.
You know, but to think that I worked and I listened and I learned from George Karl, an NBA. How many people can say that?
Yes, true.
Not many. I can. And I was very fortunate to have that experience and those situations presented to me that I took advantage of. So, but I was very fortunate for that. Yes.
Okay.
Gary Payton, feeding the basketball to Gary Payton. Who has done that in our region? In the region, right? Nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did. You know.
Yeah, I just came across that. I was surprised. I found out you were a player development coach in the NBA. You never said that to me.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't throw it out there, but it does. I don't want to seem like a bad guy, but it does kind of bother me a little bit that I have those experiences and I have that on their resume, and people don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel I should be touting myself and throwing it out. Throwing it out there. But yes, absolutely. I mean, even in college here in the United States, they talk about, Division I experience. Back in the day, I worked at DePaul University under the great Ray Meyer.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I got my start. People don't even know that.
Yeah.
I was assistant in the junior college where we went to the national title game. I was assistant at Division II where we went to the national tournament. At the NAI level, I was head coach that went to the Final Four. At the SEA Games level, won 2 silver medals, 2000 with women and men's in Thailand. So I mean, there's a lot there, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Wait, Coach, when you worked as a player development, who were the players that you were able to
Oh,
work with, if you can remember?
back with the. Oh, I know. Well, that was back in the heyday of Seattle with Gary Payton and Detlef Schrempf. You name that roster. I was on the floor with them. What a thrill it was. But you have to. I didn't want to step on anybody's toes or do anything. I just did what I was asked to do. And the main thing for me was just to listen and learn. And then with the Bucks, it was, oh my gosh. Oh, I can't, it's the same thing. I used to have to travel up to Milwaukee. Irvin Johnson was a big man that we worked with every day. I remember Gerald Oliver just worked on shell drill every day. I really have to go through the rosters at this point.
Oh,
I'm sorry, man. I guess
so about
you caught
everybody.
me off guard.
Okay, from those players, any memorable experiences? I mean, I know there are a lot of players there. Anyone who you can't remember? I mean, you had something with them.
I'll be honest. I had a player that played many years in the NBA. This was when I was a CBA coach. David Wood
Okay.
was his name. He played for Golden State and he played for Cleveland Cavaliers. He would be 6'10", wingman, can shoot the three. And I learned so much. I was a very young coach at the time from David Wood. And what I learned from David Wood, and if you look him up, his resume is extremely long for NBA. He said how he stuck in the NBA was he had to adjust to a system very, very fast. He had to pick things up. He had to show up early, stay late, pick things up, adjust quickly, and then understood his role. Whatever role that general manager or that head coach put him in, he was able to adjust to that. He didn't tell him this is what I want to do, this is what I have to do, but he adjusted to that. And I always learned from him about how to be a professional, how to conduct yourself in a professional way, how to look at the basketball game differently, not from my eyes, but from their eyes of how I can adjust to those players. And I learned that from David Wood. So, my battery's running low for some odd reason. I don't know why.
Are you using a phone?
No, I'm on the laptop, but it's plugged in. I don't know.
Might need a new one.
My battery running. Yeah, I'm old. I know I'm old. So
Didn't say that.
I know.
Okay, coach, you're running out of time. Anyway, last question, NBA
Yes, sir.
related. The playoffs is coming up. I want to know who are you picking and why? Who are you siding
Which
with
playoffs?
this coming playoffs?
Well, you're sure not going to pick Golden State, are you?
Me?
Boy, what a mess in that! What a mess in that place! What a
Yeah.
mess!
Yeah.
What a mess! I got to go with Denver just because of Denver's defense is so good.
Mhm.
You know, and Joker's so great. I'm going to go with Denver again. How's that?
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
Go back to back.
even over Boston, even over Boston. But
Mm.
I know Boston is so deep and they play so hard. But I'm gonna go Denver instead of Boston. How's that?
All right. I'll respect that.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Okay. How about LeBron? I don't know if you heard it earlier. He was try many were trying to analyze what he said about retiring. Do you think it was authentic or maybe another April Fool's prank?
I think he's just doing it. He just wants the attention. His ego's so big. He just wants the attention. And I think he ultimately wants to get an NBA team so he can have him and his son can play together. But I don't
Oh,
know.
no. So you think he wants an NBA team so that's where he's gonna not with the Lakers.
No, he's going to buy a club or be part of an ownership of a group so he can keep his hands in and do something for his son, I think.
All right. Coach, thank you. But I
Thank you,
want to
sir.
talk more about CBA. Let me do my research first.
You got it. Okay, thanks, pal.
All
All
right.
righty.
Take care.
All right.